Hey guys, I am doing my historical spotlight project over Sudoku, and so let's dive right in. So we are going to first talk about the homework from this past week, and I assigned you guys a Desmos activity where you were given something that looked very similar to a Sudoku puzzle, but instead of our numbers, we see shapes and colors, and your directions were that you could only have one shape and one color in every row and column. And you needed to pick 3 out of the 4 puzzles assigned and play around and come up with your filled out Sudoku puzzles, if you will. And so what was nice about this activity was once you filled it out correctly, you had a nice red success at the top of your page if you completed it. But here's your answer key here for number 1. And number 1 and number 2, these 2 puzzles were just 4x4s, 4 colors, 4 shapes that you had to fill out. But puzzles 3 and 4 were a little harder because they added a color into it and you also had another shape. And so which made this a 5x5 puzzle and a little bit more challenging. I think number 3 was a little harder. And I don't actually think anyone attempted puzzle number 4 because this one was definitely a little harder. And I don't think anyone tried it. But here's the answer key to this one. That definitely took me some time to work through myself. And so I totally understand the struggle with this one. But some questions I want you to think about with like reflecting on this homework activity was what was challenging about the activity? What did you think not seeing your typical Sudoku puzzle, seeing these shapes and colors, what was hard or different for you or unexpected, some things that you ran into that maybe you didn't think about? Did you get frustrated? Was it hard when you were working through the puzzle and you either had 2 circles sitting right next to each other or you saw the blues at the top of the column and the bottom of the column? Did you get frustrated and have to move your shapes around and try again? And did you have fun? Was it something that you were able to mess around with and play with and not be too hard on yourself with if you made a mistake along the way? But I hope this was a great way to launch into our topic today of Sudoku. So before we engage in our activity, we're going to just talk about some history with Sudoku. And as future math teachers, I think it's super important for us to be able to tell our students and share with our students not only the basic level of where our topics that we're teaching them come from, but really go down to the root. Because I think even thinking a few weeks back, learning about Chinese mathematics was something that really impacted me of just how many topics have been overlooked or credit has not been given where it's due. And so I wanted to make sure when talking about Sudoku that I am sharing and talking about all mathematicians and cultures that are represented here. And so Sudoku starts back, the roots of it really go back all the way to ancient Chinese culture in the 2800 BC, where they came about with magic squares. And so the mathematics behind magic squares was that each row, column, and diagonal had to add up to 15. So they're quite a plethora of arrangements that you can do there to add up to 15 in your row, column, and diagonal. But that's where the math of Sudoku kind of starts. And then from there are 2 stories that we really need to consider and talk about when we think about modern day mathematics and modern day Sudoku. The first one would be Latin squares, which Leonhard Euler came up with in 1783, a very common name that we are familiar with within mathematics. And actually, the homework activity was not a Sudoku puzzle, it was a Latin square puzzle. And what makes a Latin square special is that it's the idea that everything within that square is only showing up once in every row and column, which is what happened with your shapes and colors. And so here you see an example of a 3x3, 4x4, 5x5, and then also what we see as looks very similar to a Sudoku puzzle as a 9x9 Latin square. And that is how the advancements of Sudoku puzzles came, is Latin square 9x9 puzzles. And actually a man that goes by the name of Nikolai from Japan in 1984 came up with a puzzle in a newspaper called Sujiwa Dokushi ni Kagiru, which Sudoku just became the acronym of that word, which you can see within the first word and the second word. You see the Sudoku within there, which I thought was quite interesting. And that longer word there, not the acronym, of course, translates to the digits must be single. which we see in Sudoku of each number can only show up once in every row, column, and square. That's what made Sudoku puzzles unique and different, and only having a few of the squares filled in, and then the rest were up to you to find on your own. And so when thinking about the possibilities of all the possible Sudoku puzzles, there are 6,700 million possible Sudoku puzzles, which the number underneath is the more drawn out number there, which can be said in scientific notation as about 6.7 times 10 to the 21st is what that number is. So I think Sudoku puzzles will keep us busy for a while. And so from here, I actually want you to engage and work on this Sudoku puzzle right here. So take 5 minutes, don't have to finish it, but pause the video. There's a PDF of this Sudoku puzzle if you would like to work on it on a tablet or print it out for yourself to work through. Okay, here is the answer key for that Sudoku puzzle. How'd you do? How far did you get? How'd it go? So you might be wondering, why did I just do a simple Sudoku puzzle for this activity? Well, what if I were to tell you that I made that puzzle? And I could go into all of the details of how this idea came to be, but I came across a number file video that talked about the least number of clues that you can have in a Sudoku puzzle is 17. And that made me wonder if I could come up with a puzzle that had 17 clues that I could solve. And so I have another PDF linked in here that has a blank Sudoku puzzle sheet. And I want you to create just a filled out Sudoku page. And I'm going to go to the next slide to show you. I took a video and a screen recording of myself working through and making my Sudoku puzzle, and I have sped it up ×5. And so you will see me working through it and filling out numbers, and you'll see as I go farther and farther into the grid that I have to become a lot more careful about the numbers that I'm choosing. My first row and column were very simple and very easy, and I just chose any numbers I wanted, but as I got farther into my creation, it definitely got more challenging, and I had to be more particular about my numbers. And I ran into a few bumps along the way for sure. So if you haven't already printed out the clear sheet, I want you to, it took me about 10 minutes to create a filled out Sudoku puzzle. And so I want you to do that and pause the video and come back. And then once you come back, I am going to speed up this video to talk about some other things that happened within here. And if you would like to engage farther into this activity and create the Sudoku puzzle without it completely filled out, I'm going to share with you what I did there. And so once it's completely filled out, what I ended up doing and what this video and number file, and it's also based on some research by Gary McGuire, who says that there is no possible Sudoku puzzle that can be solved with 16 clues. It has to be 17 clues. And then he talks about this idea of interchangeable pairs. And so what you'll see me do in the video down here is that I am highlighting my pairs that are flipped in a column or a row. I'm looking at the columns here that are in different squares in the Sudoku puzzle, but are just switched spots. And so what the video and his research says is that in order to create a solvable Sudoku in a unique solution set, you have to include at least one of those numbers in your clues that you are giving to your solver. And so what I did is once I highlighted all of them, what I did was I started going through and erasing them, and I colored in my new numbers that I was leaving in purple. And so this is just me going through and erasing and solving. And so what I was left with was 9 clues, and I needed 17. So from there, my logic was very much more, let me just pick any numbers I want to finish up this Sudoku puzzle. And so this was what I ended up with. And as I started working through it, you'll see my work in light blue. 17 clues is so hard. I did not think that it would be so challenging. And so then I end up adding, I look through the answer key and I end up adding all of the orange numbers here. And I end up with 27 clues, which is a third of the puzzle, 27 out of 81. And I said, I think I can solve something like this. And so my green work here is what I'm filling out on my own, not looking at the answer key or anything. And I got stuck at the end. I got quite far into the puzzle. And then towards the end of the puzzle, I got stuck with just a few squares in each box, and I realized I needed one more number. And so I went back to my answer key and I said I needed a 7. And so at the end of the day, I ended up with 28 clues, which are what you were given in your problem that you just engaged in this activity. And so the reason I shared this story with you is because I wanted to talk about how students need to see themselves as creators within mathematics. It's not just about being doers or seeing the mathematics, but really seeing that they're able to create and be creative and have fun with things. And I think puzzles allow for that, but also an activity like this, where they could create a Sudoku puzzle, would be such an amazing activity for students. And so, some things to think about when you're going back to your classroom is to remember to have fun with your students. The classroom is a place where you have yes, there is administration and their standards, but you have the power to create a culture and an environment where students can completely change their perspective on mathematics. And so take a day to break away from your content and teach students the basic guidelines of solving a Sudoku puzzle or something like a Latin square. Or there's so many that are fun that I know many of us like as well. And this could be easily built into a logic unit within Algebra 2 or pre-calculus. And I found some schools, many of them charter schools or private schools, who have the option of a game theory class, which this would be an incredible activity for something like that. And then talk about implementing standards for mathematical practice. I feel like an activity that we just did is very much hitting standards 1 through 5 here, of problem solving, persevering, reasoning abstractly, using appropriate tools strategically. I think Sudoku is all about that. But I think that at the end of the day, students see math as this horse-blinded way of seeing the world and doing a subject, when in reality, math is so much more than that. And we know that, but this is a way that we're able to share that with our students. So I hope that this was a fun activity for you and that you had a great time. I look forward to hearing your responses, reactions, and anything that you are taking away from this. So thank you and have a good rest of your day.